Hi, I'm Lindsay Doe, clinical sexologist and host of the sex-curious show, Sexplanations. I am now hanging out on Sciencemom's spaceship. Hi, Jenny. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
And being on my show, on your show. So I want to talk to you all about sexuality from your unique perspective. Just share with me anything that you want. But I heard that you have something for us to play with while we do.
I do. Well, it's sort of a one-time thing. I do science education, and I wondered if you had ever seen Inertia Beads before.
I have. But
these are so fun.
If you haven't seen Inertia Beads, oh my goodness.
Now, you can make these yourself from party necklaces. These are made just with duct tape and then party necklaces that I cut and strung together. So you don't have to go out and order something special anytime you go to a party or like get Mardi Gras beads. You can make your own. So go ahead and give it a tug.
So you're just
gonna pull.
I've never done it before. I've only seen it done.
You've never done it?
Tiny little ones that people use for keychains and whatnot.
Oh, yay. So all you're gonna do is pull straight down, and then the beads will do the rest.
I'm so nervous.
Don't be nervous. Just pull nice and hard. Pull down.
That's amazing. Jenny and I met at a conference, and we have done a podcast together, and then we've also had breakfast and various conversations where I've learned about your background in the LDS church and how that has affected your sexuality and how you are a mom and an educator, maybe?
Yeah.
And a wife? Okay. So what do you think is the most valuable thing for people to take from your experience?
The thing that I found interesting in my own experience was how much my relationship with sexuality changed once we left the church. Because I didn't expect things to change. I'd been happily married for many years and, only had my one partner. We knew each other really well, and we sort of had our rhythm for how things would go in terms of intimacy. But then when we left the church, all of a sudden things changed, and I was surprised. I didn't expect things to change. And I realized...
What happened? I want to know.
Okay. All right. So I'll back up a little bit. We're close. We have a good relationship emotionally, which I think really impacts how your relationship is sexually. And when we decided that we were going to leave the LDS church, I mean, one of the simplest things was getting new underwear. We had worn these, long traditional garments. And so we went to the store together and had to pick out underwear, which felt like almost a little terrifying because we hadn't shopped for underwear in upwards of 10 years. Went to the the checkout feeling like we had contraband, like blushing to be like putting panties on the conveyor belt. Then when we got home and put on the new underwear, it was like, wow, like I feel kind of sexy in this underwear. It's like, this is new, this is different. But the thing that I think really changed once we left the church was the authority and the power structure. I think that I didn't really give myself permission before to feel pleasure. Like it wasn't okay to feel pleasure because I didn't think perhaps God didn't want me to feel pleasure. It was kind of the dynamic that I had. And I mean, it was a deep thing. It wasn't something that I spent time thinking about, but I think that was kind of the underlying thing. And so when I evaluated my idea of God and whether God wanted me to be in this church or not anymore, all of a sudden my idea of who God was expanded. I don't think God really cares about whether I'm experiencing pleasure in this way or not. And I certainly don't think he is disapproving of me getting aroused. So,
or maybe wants that for you. Okay.
Yes. I was surprised by how much things changed. You would think that before this happened, I would tell myself, it's okay to get aroused. And I had told myself that I wanted to get aroused when we were having sexual experiences, but it was often challenging and difficult. And I think because I had been experiencing guilt for so long when I was growing up in regards to sexuality, that then it was easier to replace that with other guilt than it was to get rid of it. And so now my new concern when I was married was often like, well, am I performing well enough? Am I doing this right? That was sort of my new worry. And once we got rid of that underlying worry, things got so much better when I was able to sort of drop both of those guilts and just be with the sexual experience and not be worrying about, am I performing? Or is it okay that I'm enjoying this? Am I enjoying it too much? Is God going to be mad at me?
And so now you feel like you have a great relationship with your sexuality?
I feel like it is much better. And I don't know if all women are like this. I feel like as a woman, my relationship with sexuality is a little more complicated because it's very hormone driven. And it waxes and wanes with my cycle in sometimes predictable ways and sometimes not predictable ways. But we've learned to come to terms with that in a better way too. I think initially there's sort of this spectrum of sexual experiences that we can have. And at the far end is the, crazy happy sex where, we're both kind of out of our minds with pleasure. And then in the middle is this more kind of sleepy, comfortable sex where we get close and we like it. And it's been good for us to realize that we don't always have to be up here. And that especially for me, sometimes it's better if I'm not trying to get up here, because if I feel like I have to get all the way up there, then afterwards I sort of resent, like, I had to work so hard and I did not want to go there. I really wanted to be here. Like, this was the experience I wanted, not up here. And again, it really depends a lot on the time of month and how the hormones are.
Yeah. I agree. I share that experience. Well, so as Sciencemom, so you have a YouTube channel where you explain different parts of science to a younger audience than maybe who's watching right now. Have you tracked your cycle at all to see where your sexual arousal and your desire for the spectrum of like amazing sex, perfunctory sex is?
Yes, we have, to be honest with you, my husband, Math Dad is sort of his nickname on our channel. He tracks my cycle very well because he's very interested in knowing like when this happens. And, 2 weeks before the cycle starts correlates very highly with I'm much more easy to arouse, very interested. And then right after my cycle ends is sort of like our lowest time. Like right when I've finished menstruating, I'm generally not so interested. So in general, that's how it goes. Well, so you hit that ovulation window or a few days before. And it makes sense biologically, right? Like our sex drive has this purpose of wanting to reproduce. And so it makes sense that around the time you ovulate, you'd be like, all right, let's do this.
Yeah. So is that something that you can talk about on your channel?
No, I don't think so.
Because I was just having a conversation with someone who started their period when they were 9. And I think that your audience is geared toward 9-year-olds.
It's true. It would be...
maybe not the you're going to be super turned on by this time, but the changes in hormones and attitude and personality, maybe even.
That definitely could be. And, puberty, I think, is a fascinating topic biologically. We go through a lot of changes when we go through puberty. And that would be something I would love to talk about at some point, but not like next week.
Subscribe to Sciencemom. See if it happens. Is Jenny going to talk about puberty, please? Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. Because what approach would you take? You always have something interactive and very entertaining.
I do. I'm all about the hands-on. Boy,
how do we do hands-on puberty?
I would have to think about that one. I'm curious, though. I wanted to ask you about if you have had any experiences with shame and sexuality.
Oh, yeah. Tons.
Because did you grow up in a conservative background as well, where sex was very much a no, don't do this?
No, I would say, so I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents had taught me that they waited until marriage. And so that's kind of what I just like, I want the ideal dreamy life. Like, I'm going to wait until marriage. And then I experienced puberty and this rush of hormones and all of these thoughts about like, I need something inside of me. Something is going, I just want to make out with things or experience these fantasies that I was creating in my head. And so then I stopped believing in the church and those ideals because it felt like such an enormous conflict with what was natural. I do have an episode on sexplanations about shame where I talk with a friend. We go back and forth just listing off the parts of our sexuality that we experience shame around and how we cope with that, not in an institutionalized way.
I'm glad that you were able to navigate that.
Thank you.
Smoothly, because it's tough, and it took me years. And I remember like in our first few years of marriage, sort of this expectation or hope from my partner of him really wanting me to enjoy this.
Aww.
And this feeling of like I would like to enjoy this, but it's hard because for so long any feelings of arousal were just coupled so tightly with this like kind of inside, like this horror inside, like, I've done something terrible. And it was really hard to uncouple that. It took a long time.
So I know more than what you've shared here. And part of, I think, why you've been so successful is that you have been curious. So for example, the story of your first day as a married couple, like that to me is what sets you apart from other people who are still struggling with their sexuality and that repression, is because you had some curiosity and you're like, okay, well, now that I'm supposed to know about sex, what do I need to know? Here's a book. Let's do some reading.
We did. And my husband was just as much a neophyte and completely new to the experience as I was. Like he was completely new to it as well. And I wanted to make sure we were on the same page. And so as we were driving to our honeymoon hotel,
I love this story.
I had a book. It was His Needs, Her Needs, and it had a nice chapter on sex, which I had read before, but had been too embarrassed to talk to him about before we, like actually did the deed and got married. But once we were married, I was like, all right, I'm going to read this out loud to you. And it went through and just described like the basic biology. Like I had a really nice kind of comprehensive comprehensive overview of like what causes an orgasm and, and what to expect with sexual experience. And we read that as we were going down. And there were a couple parts in particular where I remember it mentioned that most men, after they climax, then their arousal is just sort of gone. Like they're like, all right, now I'll take a shower, and like they kind of move on. And for women, they tend to, their arousal goes down more gradually, and that you can hurt your partner's feelings if you climax and then just get out of bed and, go start checking your email. And as we were driving, I remember him being like, really? Like that would be weird. Like I wonder if it's like that. And then after we first had sex, he was like, yeah, it was totally like that. After I came, I just wasn't even thinking about sex anymore. So that was a good thing to know in advance. And I think, educating yourself is always so helpful. For me as a woman, knowing that sex would be painful initially, that the penetration, it was, a high likelihood that would be painful, that was good to know. And that part can be tough to navigate because there can be like physiological causes and conditions that contribute to that you're not going to overcome just by having sex more often. And that took a little bit of time to figure out as well. And it wasn't for me personally, and I don't know if this is a thing. You'll have to tell me if like some people have a birth canal so small that they're not going to enjoy sex till they have a kid, like the actual penetration part. That was
we're just going to open it up this way rather than open it that way.
That was honestly my experience. So most of the part leading up to penetration was enjoyable for me, and I would have arousal then, but the actual penetration part was typically uncomfortable, like not something I really enjoyed.
Until you had a child.
Until I had a baby. And then after I had a baby, I was like, this is what people have been talking about. Like,
now I'm so curious.
That was my experience.
Other things you think we should know?
So I consider myself, when it comes to like talking about sexuality, I have to say I would consider myself more on the inexperienced, and like this is not my area of expertise, except I'm very happy with my relationship. Like I have a wonderful, wonderful spouse and a partner. Like if I was to try and leave people with parting words of advice, it would be sensitive to your partner's needs. Make sure that you care about them and that they care about you. And then when you're trying to have a good sexual experience together, I think your chances are much higher that it will be good for both of you.
I like the two of you together. You're both curious people, so it works really well. Thank you, Jenny, for being on the show, in your show.
You're welcome.
If you want to learn more about Jenny and her channel, you can go to youtube.com/Sciencemom. Your Twitter is Jenny Ballif.
It is.
And your Instagram is The Sciencemom. And your Facebook is The Sciencemom.
Correct.
And you do videos all the time teaching people about climate and what's the next one you're going to do?
Science experiments you can do at home.
Science experiments you can do at home.
Yes, and hopefully if we are able to get funding and keep going forward, we have a lot of series planned, like Sciencemom explains chemistry, Sciencemom explains physics,
Sciencemom explains puberty.
Possibly that one too. We'll see.
That would be amazing. Well, thank you for being on this show.
Thank you for having me.
Stay curious.